When are you too old to consider fighting professionally? Is it worth it if you don't go pro? You know, somebody asked me this question the other day, in a different form, right? And this is essentially what I had to say. There's nothing wrong with having a fight or two. There's absolutely, positively nothing wrong with having a fight or two. However, if you're over the age of 30 and you've never fought before, chances are you should probably not bother trying to make something of it. Truthfully, you could even make an argument for like 25, right? I think 25 you probably could, but if you're like 27, 28, and you just picked up training like a couple of months ago and you're like, wow, this stuff's pretty fun, maybe I should fight. Have a fight, maybe two. If you really want to go crazy, maybe three. All right, but don't get delusions about it. All right, don't have delusions of grandeur about how you're going to be the next Conor McGregor, because you're not. All right. I had my first fight at the age of 19, and I remember being starry-eyed, right? I remember back then it was, I'm going to win this amateur fight, and then Dana White's going to call me next week. He's going to call me personally. His personal cell phone. He's going to be like, wow, Scott, you're a stud, bro. You're a stud. If you were right here, right now, I'd tell you to fuck my wife. You need to be in the UFC, bro. Fucking, that's like, obviously not really that, but I was starry-eyed, and I thought that I would get in there ASAP. When I was 19, I had my first MMA fight. I was starry-eyed, and I thought that things were going to go a lot quicker for me than they did. Then I lost my first fight. Then I started looking at the dudes around me who were also fighters, who were at the same part of their career as me. They were 1-0 or 0-1, right? And then I looked at the dudes in my region who were in the UFC, and I realized, oh, dude, those guys had amateur careers of like 8 to 10 fights, and then they ended up having 10 to 15 fights before they got in the UFC. Some of them even more, right? Some dudes had practically entire careers before they ended up getting into the UFC. I know tons of dudes who they didn't get looked at by the UFC until they were in their 30s. And I'm sitting here 19 years old thinking I'm gonna fucking like be in the UFC. Hell no, right? I'm telling you this to kind of keep you sober, right? To make sure that you understand that, all right, you got to make sure that you're not gonna end up getting yourself into a fucked up situation because you think that things are gonna be possible when they're not. Okay, I'm not 30. I'm not done fighting yet. But I realized soon into my career, I think it was like 3 or 4 fights in, I was like, all right, I'm going to take my time and I'm going to do it my way. If I make it to the heights that I want to make it to, great. If not, all right, whatever. But I need to be careful because I've seen how people end up after their careers, and it is sometimes not very good. Now, me, I know sometimes I stutter, sometimes I repeat myself, sometimes I lose my train of thought, but I am very coherent. I am very grounded. And I like to believe I make sense. I like to think that I'm eloquent enough as to where somebody could listen to what I have to say, understand it, and actually implement it, and know that it's coming from a standpoint of either wisdom or experience. Which, I mean, you kind of gain wisdom from experience, but whatever, right? I don't want to be one of those guys who has a slur in his voice, and when you ask him something, you see the look in his eyes, and you know that there's dial-up modem noises. I don't want to be that guy, so I'm gonna take my fucking time. All right, and if I get to where I want to be, great. If not, whatever. All right. At the end of the day, I don't think there is a such thing as too old, because I've seen dudes in their 40s have their first fight. Right, but as I said, it was just they wanted to fight once. They weren't trying to make it to the UFC. That was not what they were doing. That's not how they wanted it. All right. They were just getting it out of their system. All right. There's nothing wrong with getting it out of your system. But over the age of, I'd say 25, if you haven't had any sort of training whatsoever in your entire life, you should definitely not bank on the idea of, having a career, right? If you're not trying to make a career of it, it's not worth it to have more than 1, 2, maybe 3. There you go. Now, what should you do if you commit first-degree vehicular manslaughter? You should get a lawyer and keep your fucking mouth shut.